I'm standing in the hallway of the Grand River Hotel, right on Main Street, my heart tight in my chest. One step away, behind the half-open door of the bridal suite, I hear my own daughter laughing, her tone sharper than a dull pair of scissors if Mom asks. Tell her it doesn't fit. It looks like something from a thrift store. The words pierce me like a needle without a thimble. I don't go in. I clutch the garment bag against my chest and take a deep breath to keep my voice from unraveling. My name is Evelyn Marwood. I'm 74 years old, a widow and a retired seamstress. Though retired feels too big a word, a seamstress never truly retires. I live in a creaky old house in the historic district of Savannah, Georgia, that groans when the weather shifts. From that house, I've stitched together a life with patience, neighborhood clients, last-minute alterations, school uniforms that kept the bills paid. 6 months I spent sewing Abigail's dress, lace from Charleston, heirloom pearls, silk bought on installment $2,800 in fabric alone, not counting thread, needles, or the coffee that kept me awake every dawn. As the city quieted, I kept stitching tiny, invisible stitches, the kind that don't show in photos, but hold the world together. I skipped a trip to Asheville, counted pennies for utilities, cut back on groceries, all so my daughter could walk down the aisle wrapped in something made by my hands and my pride. This morning, I arrived with the garment bag slung over my arm, handled as carefully as if it held a newborn. Inside, the reception room felt like a movie set. Makeup artists, hairstylists, lights bouncing off mirrors. The groom's mother, Mrs. Beatrice Langley, issuing orders with a polite smile. They asked to see the dress. I unzipped the bag slowly. Like opening a precious letter, there was a moment of silence. Then came the look I know too well, the one that appraises, labels, and dismisses. Very handmade, someone murmured, and the rest was a blur. I didn't make a scene. At my age, you learn dignity is sewn from the inside. I zipped up the bag, stepped back, and walked out to the hallway. Abigail's laughter hit me like a final stitch in the back of my neck. I made it to the elevator with dry eyes and a straight back, carrying the weight of the dress and my own. That day, I didn't just take the dress with me. I took what was left of my patience. The wedding morning started early for everyone but me. I arrived on time at the Grand River Hotel, the dress from 6 months of work hanging over my arm, a knot in my stomach. I rode up to the bridal suite's floor, and the moment I crossed the threshold, I felt like I'd stepped into another world. Abigail sat in a high-backed chair, surrounded by makeup artists wielding brushes like fine art tools, a hairstylist pinning her curls with silver clips, a photographer snapping away, and at the center of it all, the groom's mother, Mrs. Beatrice Langley. I'd never seen Mrs. Beatrice up close before. Tall, slender, dressed in a tailored ivory suit with understated pearls. She had the air of someone who doesn't need to flaunt old money from Buckhead. She moved her hand like a conductor, controlling the lighting, the angles, even the room's temperature. When I approached with the garment bag, she turned to me with a smile as perfect as it was hollow. I unzipped it slowly to reveal the dress, delicate lace, flawless drape, pearls catching the morning light. She looked it over, tilted her head, and said in a soft but cutting tone, very handmade, for the event photos. Maybe something more modern. I felt the blood rush to my face. Before I could respond, Abigail spoke up. Mom, I think I'll wear the other dress, the one we bought in Buckhead. She said it without meeting my eyes, as if that softened the blow. I knew the one, a designer gown, $9,500 justified as an investment to look flawless. I swallowed hard, and zipped up the bag. I didn't ask questions. I'd learned the hard way in other family battles that this wasn't the time to argue. I turned, ready to walk out with my head held high. Then, in the reflection of a side mirror, I saw Mrs. Beatrice wink at the photographer and murmur, almost under her breath, "This way. We avoid a family scene." I gripped the garment bag tighter against my chest and kept walking toward the door. I didn't know that decision would open a door neither of them could close. Later. Chapter 3. A visit smelling of freshly ground coffee. 2 days passed since the wedding. No calls. No texts. Not even a card with flowers. Just the silence that settles when people think it's best to let things cool off. I spent those hours moving on autopilot, folding sheets, watering plants, brewing tea that went cold untouched. The dress lay spread across the dining table, covered in protective paper, like a fragile patient. That morning, the doorbell rang early. When I opened it, a woman stood there with a warm smile and honest eyes, holding a tray of pastries and a thermos, wafting the aroma of freshly ground coffee. "Evelyn, do you remember me? I'm Marissa," she said, "Abigail's friend from college." I invited her in. As I poured the coffee, I noticed her eyeing the dress on the table with a mix of curiosity and awe. She told me, straight to the point, that she'd seen Abigail at her bachelorette party in Miami, over drinks and loud music. She overheard her laughing with friends about the handmade dress her mom was sewing. She repeated, almost word for word, the phrase I'd heard at the hotel. My stomach knotted, but I was grateful she told me directly. Marissa approached the dress and gently lifted a corner of the lace. This is art," she whispered. "Not everyone can stitch like this." Then she told me about her cousin, Clara, a rural schoolteacher in a small town in Appalachia. She painted a picture of her life, a woman teaching kids of all ages in a low-ceilinged schoolhouse, caring for her sick mother, and planning to marry her lifelong partner in a few months. "She doesn't have a dime for a proper dress," Marissa added, "and she'd never accept one bought for her. But if she saw this, I think it would light up her soul." I stared at the dress, its pearls sewn one by one, like tiny trapped stars. The silence filled with the scent of coffee and the image of a woman I'd never met, but who, according to Marissa, would value what my own daughter discarded. If the dress wasn't enough for my daughter, maybe it would be a treasure for someone else. 2 days later, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was Marissa with a slender young woman, tan-skinned, with wide eyes that took in everything like she was seeing the city for the first time. She wore a simple cotton dress and a long braid draped over her shoulder. "Evelyn, this is my cousin Clara," Marissa said. "She came from Appalachia on an overnight bus. I offered her water and a moment to rest. But she didn't want to wait. Her hands, rough from chalk and erasers, brushed the protective paper covering the dress. With a gentle gesture, I helped her try it on. The silence that fell when she looked in the mirror was so thick even the dining room clock seemed to pause. The dress fit her like it was made for her, the waist perfect, the drape flawless, the lace hugging her shoulders as if it had always belonged to her. Her eyes welled with tears. "It's more than I ever imagined," she whispered. "Not even in my dreams." Marissa, never missing a beat, pulled out her camera. She snapped photos from every angle. Clara by the window, Clara laughing shyly, Clara touching the pearls like they were memories, with a few warm filters. She posted the images to Instagram with a caption that squeezed my heart. "My cousin Clara is getting married, and this dress was hand-stitched by an invisible seamstress who spent her life sewing dreams for others. Today, that dream is hers too." I didn't think much of it. I turned off my phone and went back to my routine. But the next day, Marissa burst in, excited. Aunt Evelyn, you have to see this, she said. Showing me her phone screen, the photos had spread to bridal groups on Facebook, indie fashion accounts, and forums where women shared ideas for low-budget weddings. Comments poured in from Atlanta, Nashville, Charleston, all asking about prices, timelines, and shipping. I, who thought my world had shrunk to my dining room and a handful of local clients, watched a dress travel faster than any train. I never imagined a social media post could outshine any runway in Buckhead. Marissa showed up one afternoon with a look I've learned to recognize, the one that means someone's carrying a big idea. She sat at my kitchen table, pushed aside the coffee mug, and said, Aunt Evelyn, why don't we open a studio? You bring the talent and experience, I'll handle the social media and photography. We could call it Golden Needle. The name hung in the air. At first, I hesitated, 74 years old. And life had taught me to be cautious with dreams. But her conviction sparked something I thought had gone out. With $3,500 from my savings and a small loan from the local credit union, we dove in. We found a small space in Savannah's historic district, with high walls and morning light that felt like a blessing. Together, we cleaned, painted, and set up a cutting table, 2 sewing machines, and a rack that seemed too big for so little work. For now, orders came sooner than expected. A wedding dress for a ceremony in Asheville, full of floral embroidery inspired by mountain wildflowers, and a quinceañera gown for a girl from Augusta who wanted a classic design with a modern twist. Amid threads, needles, and ribbons, the studio came to life. Then an indie fashion blog discovered our story. The post called me a Savannah seamstress who turns dreams into fabric and, without naming names, quoted the phrase, looks like something from a thrift store. Anyone reading it could feel the venom in those words. The comments exploded. Women from all over wrote indignantly, saying the dress was a gem, that handmade work deserved respect, that every stitch carried years of skill. The post was shared so many times my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I looked at the rack, now brimming with fabrics and orders, and thought about the dress my daughter rejected. The dress my daughter rejected was about to stitch me a new life. It was a quiet morning in the studio. Sunlight streamed softly through the window, and I was checking the hem of a magenta dress when the door opened. There was Abigail, impeccable as always, holding a bouquet of white roses and a smile I couldn't tell was polite or calculated. Mom, she said, this place is beautiful. I came to congratulate you and to propose something. I invited her in. She walked slowly, eyeing the fabrics, threads, and framed photos of brides I'd dressed. She sat, placed the bouquet on the table, and started talking in a diplomatic tone. You could grow so much if you modernize the business a bit. Think about synthetic fabrics, they're cheaper, easier to source. And if we mass produce, you could sell more and make more. I set the needle down and looked at her. Unhurried. Abigail, I didn't open this studio to make dresses in bulk. If I've learned anything in my life, it's that quality isn't negotiable. She pursed her lips, like she did as a child when she didn't get her way. But you'd be more profitable. I smiled faintly, but firmly. I'd rather be unforgettable than profitable. Before she could reply, Marissa rushed in with an envelope in hand. Evelyn. This came by courier. I opened it. It was a letter on law firm letterhead, representing the Buckhead boutique where Abigail bought her wedding dress. The cold, direct text accused me of copying an exclusive embroidery design from their collection, demanding I cease production or face legal action. My stomach dropped. I knew instantly which embroidery they meant, the design I'd created months ago for the dress Abigail rejected, the one that went viral thanks to Clara and Marissa. I looked up, and saw my daughter adjusting her hair, avoiding my eyes. "Mom, I'm sure it's a misunderstanding," she murmured, but her tone sounded more cautious than surprised. I knew the truth. They'd copied my work after seeing it online. The problem was, on paper, it looked the other way around. I didn't know whether to fight in court or at my own kitchen table. The same day the boutique's letter arrived, Marissa took it personally. She called Patricia Monroe, a client who also happened to be an intellectual property lawyer. Patricia arrived at the studio with a briefcase and the confidence of someone who's fought tough cases. "Evelyn, we need everything," she said. "Photos, sketches, logs, even receipts for the materials." We spent hours going through my notebooks, where I'd jotted down dates, measurements, and coffee stains next to embroidery sketches. Marissa provided the original photos from Clara's session, complete with timestamps. Patricia built a case so solid that, a week later, the boutique's law firm backed off quietly, like someone who knows they'll lose and doesn't want to leave a trace. The relief was short-lived. That same day, a young, elegant woman walked into the studio, her perfume instantly recognizable high-end from Buckhead. It was Felicity Langley, Mrs. Beatrice's niece. She needed an urgent order. Her wedding in Charleston was in 6 weeks, and she wanted an exclusive dress. She didn't flinch when I quoted $6,000. I accepted without hesitation. But days later, while sewing a sleeve, a sharp pain shot through my right hand. The doctor was blunt tendinitis. "No strain," he warned, "or it could become chronic." I sat in front of the unfinished dress, feeling the clock ticking faster than ever. The ivory silk stared back at me. A challenge. That's when I looked at Gloria and Rose, the two seamstresses I'd hired recently, both in their 60s. They'd been let go from garment factories for not keeping up anymore, until now. I'd only trusted them with minor alterations and straight seams. But I knew I had a choice: cling to doing it alone and risk my health, or hand them the reins. I took a deep breath, picked up the fabric, and placed it on Gloria's table. "Let's do this together. I'll teach you every stitch like it's a song." It was time to stop sewing alone and start conducting the orchestra. Chapter 8. The wedding that closed a cycle. The weeks before Felicity's wedding were a perfect choreography between Gloria, Rose, and me. I marked. They sewed. I corrected. They perfected. They learned my invisible stitches like a family secret. The dress, ivory silk with hand-embroidered lace, seemed to glow with its own light. Every time we hung it on the mannequin, the studio fell silent, as if it knew it was meant for something big. On delivery day, we drove early to Charleston. The house where Felicity greeted us looked like it belonged in a magazine's sprawling garden. Magnolias in bloom, soft music in the background. She walked into the room with her hair pinned up and a nervous smile. When she saw the dress, she pressed her hands to her mouth. "It's perfect," she whispered. "I don't know how to thank you, Evelyn." I helped her try it on. It fit like it was born for her body. In front of the mirror, she turned slowly, touching the lace with care. "I've never seen anything so well made," she said, her voice loud enough to carry through the room. Then Mrs. Beatrice appeared, impeccable in an emerald green dress. She carried her usual air, confident, commanding the space. She stopped when she saw her niece. For a moment, her eyes softened. Then, aware of me, she forced a smile. "It looks very nice. Mrs. Marwood, my congratulations." It wasn't glowing praise, but from her, it was like a national award. I nodded. And then I saw her. Abigail. She stood behind Beatrice, dressed in a coral silk outfit, watching the scene. Our eyes met. and I read something in her gaze I hadn't seen in years, a mix of pride and shame. Pride for the public recognition. Shame for knowing it came from someone who'd once dismissed my work. With her there to hear it, I said nothing. The moment didn't need words. The dress was there. Flawless. Speaking for me. My hands. And all the hours I'd poured into it. As we left the house, the Charleston air smelled of fresh cut grass and the promise of rain. In the car, Gloria and Rose chatted about technical details of the dress, already planning the next challenge. I sat quietly, thinking about how much had changed since that hotel hallway, that day. I understood respect is earned, even if it arrives years late. The months that followed were a whirlwind I never imagined living at 74. Golden Needle became a known name among brides, quinceañeras, and even young designers seeking inspiration. We had a 5-month wait list, orders from Maine to Mississippi, and a studio that could barely keep up. One day, a national TV reporter showed up unannounced. She wanted to do a lifestyle segment on the revival of artisanal sewing in America. They filmed me working, interviewed Gloria and Rose, and showed photos of brides in our creations. When the segment aired, the calls and messages multiplied. That's when Abigail started showing up more often. She'd bring pastries, flowers, her tone kinder, more like an ambassador than a daughter. Mom, with all your earnin', you should think about a manager, someone to handle accounts, schedules. I could do it. I listened quietly, then answered slowly, like smoothing a hem to keep it from fraying. I don't need managers. Abigail, I need respect. I saw the word hit her. I didn't say it to hurt her. But at this stage in my life, things must be called what they are. After that, her demeanor grew more cautious, like she was stepping carefully to avoid a misstep. Meanwhile, the studio thrived. One Monday morning, I got a call from a young woman in Nashville. Her voice was firm. No nonsense. I want a dress that doesn't compromise for anyone. One that doesn't need fashion's permission to be mine. Her words slid through me like thread through a needle's eye. Effortless. We agreed on a design inspired by Nashville's skyline, with clean lines and embroidery evoking the Smoky Mountains. That evening, after the studio's bustle quieted, I was alone. The sunset streamed through the window, painting the spools of thread and stacked fabrics orange. I laid out the silk for the new dress. Touching it, I felt the same tingle as years ago, when I started sewing Abigail's dress. Only now, there was no fear of rejection, no need for anyone to validate my work. There was a quiet certainty. Every stitch I make carries my name, my story, my voice. Some stitches are sewn for others, but the most important ones, for yourself.